I will be your moderator this afternoon for the 45-minute webinar. Our goal for this webinar is to have a resource person share her insights of developing VRS based on her experience and first-hand knowledge. This hopes to be an avenue for us to share our hesitations on setting up VRS, knowing that there are people who are in the same boat, how we can make us feel better and boost our confidence. We can also probably use this avenue to collaborate with those who have experience. So like Leah, I myself, we do some of the VRS in other countries. So this is just the beginning. This is just an introduction of what we're going to do. Hopefully later on we can discuss on where we can help and what we can do to enhance our VRS. So after the 30-minute presentation, our resource person will entertain questions. Before I introduce our speaker formally, just a few guidelines. So we are muting all of your accounts, but you can all ask questions in advance using the chat box. So there's the chat box there. We're pointing it out so you can see it from your screen. This will go to everyone. Please send your questions there or mention to us if you want to join or you can hear us or there are some technical difficulties that we will address. The second thing is we noticed we added one more platform, thinking that we might not be able to address all the concerns and the limited capabilities we have using Google Meet. So with the help of with help of another partner, we're going to have this other platforms in case you cannot log it in. We posted in our account the URL, the link for that. So so far this is the most important things, the basic rules that we have this afternoon. In a bit, I'm going to share with you our Pascal will take over. Okay, so I hope the instructions are clear. Okay. So to formally introduce our speaker, okay, Pascalia, resource person is Pascalia Terzi. She's currently the instruction librarian at Georgetown University in Qatar. She was previously the subject librarian for humanities and social sciences at the Zabayan University in Kazakhstan and the librarian at the Electric and Electronic Engineering Department at the Bristol University in Greece. He holds a master's degree in digital libraries and information services from Oras University, Sweden, and is currently pursuing a second master's degree in media in the creative industries from Malmö University in Sweden. So without much further ado, I'll give the floor to Pascalia. Okay, so there you go. So present. Okay, we're in. I think hopefully everyone sees it.
Okay, so hi everyone. I am Pascalia. I'm currently the instructional librarian in Georgetown University here in Qatar. Before I was in Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. And I used in both cases virtual services. So I'm just I'm not an expert in this. I'm just going to share my personal experience. In Nazarbayev, I was the one who kind of arranged the virtual services here there. But right now, we are just following with what we had before. Okay. So I'll just share my experience. My presentation is going to be relatively short, and I just want you to ask me questions at the end if you want something like some clarification or anything like that, okay? So I'll go now to the second slide that says definition. So what is a virtual service, a virtual reference service? It mainly has to do with the communication channel that you are using. Normal reference, of course, is face-to-face usually, whereas virtual, it usually uses some kind of communication channel that you are not with the user, like with chat, email, video conferencing, like what we're doing right now, voice over IP, web browsing, instant messaging. All these are examples of communication channels that are used for virtual reference. This is the for definition given by the Reference and User Services of Association in ALA. What it is not, virtual reference is not when you are using any kind of digital resource to fulfill the information need of your user. For example, if you're just using a database or your electronic catalog, that is not virtual reference. It mainly has to do with the communication channel that you are using. There is, in Nazarbayev University, when we started our virtual reference service, the first thing that we did was to educate a little bit ourselves, and we used the guidelines for implementing and maintaining virtual reference service, the one created by the Reference and User Services Association. It's a relatively short document. I am not sure if I can share it with you right now. If you click on the link, you can check it out yourself.
Excuse me, Natalia. Can you,
yes.
For other reason, actually, the site sharing is you, not. And then when we try to start sharing, it goes to the not to the PowerPoint presentation, but it's just whatever. It's let me show you. It's not sharing the account. It looks like this. Let me tell it to you. It's not the presentation that you can share as well. It looks like this. We sent in your screen cap.
You cannot see the.
No. We cannot transfer for whatever reason. Unless you are just going to be on our camera.
Should I download it in PDF and send it to you, and maybe you can share it somehow?
For whatever reason, we will stop sharing from our end. Or you stop sharing? Are you doing sharing on your end? It looks like it says Australia is presenting.
Yeah, for me it says that I am presenting.
Yeah, but so when you're presenting, I think we cannot show the screen from our end. That's how it goes, Rusty, right? So you must be the one to click the camera, the one that we're clicking in the middle. Does it work for you? The one for presenting? The one in the middle?
Should I say turn off camera?
No, it should be presenting.
Should I stop presenting?
Yes, first. Stop presenting first, just a minute. And then
okay.
Just the screen, and then we're going to shift to the presentation slide that we showed. Okay. That's it. We made it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank God.
Okay, sorry. So some definitions, sorry to cut that. Some definitions, which slide do you want us to get through?
Okay, now you can go to the next one.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
So I shared the presentation with you. So if you click now on the link, you can check out the standards that we use, the ones that I'm talking about, the standards that we use in Nazarbayev University to kind of, structure our virtual service there. It was a new service in Nazarbayev University. It was totally new. So if someone is creating something from the very start, it's a good idea to just check it out. The same website also have some articles from other people explaining how they used these standards. Okay, you can go to the next slide. There are differences and some similarities between my two experiences with services. The first similarity is that we both the universities had access to this software called LibAnswers. It's part of LibApps, the same company that creates the LibGuides. So I am not promoting this software right now. I'm just saying what we use. So LibAnswers has this two features that we used. One is the LibAnswers that you can create frequently asked questions and then embed them like in a web page, in a page in your library site. And you can also use instant messaging, chat. And they have like a nice way to communicate with each other. They can create like a call to question bank from which you can kind of source questions from your users and then edit them and present them as frequently asked questions. If someone has more questions about this software, we can talk about later how exactly we use it. The commonality is the visibility, that usually the chat service will be visible in the home page of the library. So right now I cannot share, maybe I'll share the link to the library, to the GUQ library, and you can see that we have the chat on the first page. So what did we have different? The difference was mainly about how much data and which kind of data we're keeping. And in Nazarbayev University, we kept all the conversations that we had through chat and all the questions that we received through LibAnswers. We also had a difference on ticketing. We don't use ticketing at all in Georgetown University. Ticketing is like, let's say, an automated system that gathers from different sources the questions that you get from your users, because you might have questions through email, for example, you might have questions through chat, you might have questions through social media. This software connects also with Facebook, and you can receive questions from there. And then you can create like a database of all these questions. But in Georgetown University, currently, we are not using this system at all. And I will explain later why. So the main difference is also the number of users. Nazarbayev University was a bigger university with a greater variety of groups. We had undergraduates, masters, faculty, doctorate, etc. Whereas in Georgetown, we only have faculty and undergrad students. So the number of questions that we receive in our virtual reference is much less, of course, and less varied as well. Another thing that is different, that in Nazarbayev University, we created a specific policy on the service. For example, what are the goals of this service, how it's different from normal reference service, how the librarian should behave when engaging in the various forms of different service, virtual reference service, and one of the most important aspects was what do we do with data, with the data that we gathered from our users, both the personal ones, like their emails, their names, their location, and their conversational ones, right? Like what they said to us through chat, what they are writing to us through email. All this is important because of privacy issues. I will mention it later. And the second very different aspect was the weather. So the weather actually can affect you, like the reason why would you start a reference service, a virtual reference service. In Nazarbayev, it was because the weather there is very cold during the winter, and we could go like for 1 week without students being able to reach the campus because of snow and ice on the roads. They would have to stay at home. So that was one of the reasons why we initiated the virtual reference, so we can kind of help them when they couldn't reach the campus. Whereas here now in Georgetown University, we initiated a virtual reference because of coronavirus, right? People cannot access the library anymore, so they need a lot more help with accessing online sources. So I guess that would be the reason for you also to initiate virtual references right now, but I mean, it could help with other crisis situations, right, as the weather or any other thing that might appear later on. Can you go to the next slide? So, it's important through this crisis in Georgetown University, the main marketing channel that we are actually using is the library newsletters. So as soon as all these changes had to be implemented, the building closed down completely. So we had to rearrange how we approach, right, like libraries. So for this one, we communicated with our patrons through library newsletters mainly, and then also through the emails that the upper management was sending out to explain to the community, like along with other departments, what kind of changes they would implement, like the career services, the student development department and everything. Library was also included in those emails. So we had mainly two communication channels to explain to our users what we're doing with virtual reference and how they can approach it. In Nazarbayev University, we had another approach. We tried to multiply the points of access to virtual reference. So as I mentioned, we had chat there. We had lib answers, which is like this automated ticketing system where people can submit their questions. And we put this virtual reference access points in more, let's say, virtual spaces than we do in Georgetown. We had it on the homepage. We had it in almost every LibGuide that subject librarians created. We also put it in other web pages apart from the homepage, right? Like if someone went to our about page or to the staff page, we would have the chat service there available too. So that's how we try to make our community aware that they can reach to us like wherever they are, that we are available. So the crucial factor is community, because in Nazarbayev we were like a bigger community and maybe people wouldn't read so much our emails. We adopted this approach. Whereas in Georgetown, we are a smaller community, people know each other, so usually they will read our emails. And it's highly likely that they will know from the emails where to find it as a virtual service, which is through the email and the chat. Can you go to the next slide? Virtual services are divided in two types, the synchronous and the asynchronous. Email and live answers with the ticketing system and the FAQs, it's an asynchronous type, right? Which means that you cannot get instant feedback from your users. So this type of virtual reference is actually more popular in Georgetown University, and it was more popular in Nazarbayev with the faculty members. I guess it has to do with age, the age group of your users, and also again how big your community is and how diverse. So our chat, I can say that it's not being used very much in Georgetown University. People prefer to teach us through emails, basically. The bad thing about this, the problem, let's say, with asynchronous communication is, of course, that you have limited opportunity for feedback from your user, right? And you cannot really go back and forth with constant emails asking more and more information. So it's a bit better when you answer questions about let's say your user cannot access a specific article, or they want help with downloading a chapter from an ebook, simple things like that. It doesn't work as well if you need to explain how to use something like a database, or how to create a better, research question, stuff like that. Can you go to the next? Okay. So chat is the synchronous, let's say, a type of synchronous virtual reference. You can get instant feedback from your user, but again, it's a bit limited. So I'm listing the problems that you will probably have. First of all, interruptions with the connection, because the connection, whether from your side or from the user side, might get interrupted because, again, the weather, the quality of the internet connection. A lot of times, users just navigate to other pages, and depending on the software that you're using, it might cut off your connection, or it might become inactive, or your user might forget that they need to navigate back to that page to continue chatting, or they might even close the tab before they actually close it and terminate the conversation. So, these kind of problems. I have also noticed that users might lose patience with asking questions, like asking clarifying questions. Although it's supposed to be like synchronous and you have instant feedback, it's not as instant as having a face-to-face conversation, right? So you need to pay a little bit attention, like how many questions you ask and how you frame those questions. Try to avoid asking too many questions, because then it's when they lose patience. Or try not to give them too much information as well, because they get a little bit overwhelmed with that. They might lose, for example, the flow of the conversation. They don't know how to scroll back to what was previously said, etc. And again, it's difficult to share instructions, especially if you need to share instructions explaining how an interface works. It's really difficult, except if you have some parallel software that also enables screen sharing, for example. That would make it a little bit more easy. But then it needs to be compatible with your user's side, right? Maybe their browser or their computer doesn't enable this screen sharing. So you need to take into account this as well. Can you go to the next slide? So are you hearing me correctly? Can you hear me clearly?
It's very clear. It's very clear.
Okay. So in general, good practice is about having a conversation and having a virtual reference interview. A lot of things from the face-to-face reference interview apply as well in virtual reference, right? You need to start with an open-ended question like, how can I help you? What would you like to ask us today, etc. A lot of times you will notice that there is some kind of interruption or hesitation from the user side, especially in the chat reference. So you might want to follow up with additional questions if you see this kind of hesitation from your user. And always remember, when you end your reference interview, always ask if they need something else, because people might think that you are in a hurry or something like that. So always ask if you need help with anything else. And always, if something hasn't been resolved entirely, like a question, always remember to forward them to an alternative channel of communication, right? Tell them, for example, you can send me an email if you have any further questions, or we can set up for an online meeting through, let's say, like we are doing today, to show you a little bit better, to explain to you a little bit better how to use this database, etc., etc. You might also encounter some difficult or offensive conversations, right? Like this, this has happened to me a couple of times, both in Azerbaijan and here, or some offensive behavior from the user. So you need to handle it with care. And that's why it's good to have a policy that kind of lists out how you will approach and how you will resolve this kind of situation, so that the blame is not put on you, especially if you save the chat transcripts from conversations that you have with your users, and someone could use this against you, right? And say, look how this person, this librarian talked to me. I cannot accept this, right? So, but if you have a thorough policy that kind of lists what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior, and that you are, how to say, entitled to terminate a conversation that is offensive to you, that is a kind of shield for you and your service, okay? And when you try to manage this kind of situations. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, I think I should have this before. So about video conferencing. So video conferencing is a fully synchronous virtual service. When, like a few years back, actually, it wasn't that easy to use, right? Like the internet connections are improving. The quality of the video and the sharing options are also improving. So I guess this is going to be much more used in years to come. I haven't used it a lot for reference communication, I have to say, because as I said, here in Georgetown, usually they contact us with email. But I do use it more about research consultations. For example, if a user is starting out their honors thesis and they need like a more thorough consultation on, you know, like how to do it based on library sources, then we use it more, right? Like it can take like half an hour, 1 hour. So, I mean, to give a very thorough virtual reference on research topics, it's really difficult to do through email or chat. So if someone approaches a more difficult reference question like for research, you should, how to say, suggest to them to use video conferencing if possible. We also use it for classes, for instruction. Now in Cyprus we are totally closed, and our users need to explain like a database use or evaluation of sources. We will use video conferencing. And again, you always need to be, if you're giving a class, for example, or an honors, and you would like to reuse this video for some other purpose, you always need to ask if people want it to be recorded. Especially here in Qatar, for example, people are very, how to say, sensitive regarding their privacy and their faces being recorded, or even their voices. So you have to take into account this kind of, you know, sensitivities that your user group might have. So it has its advantages and its problems. The main advantage is that you can it's easier to give instructions on interfaces of databases, evaluating sources, etc., and you can share your screen easier. But the main problem are the connectivity issues, which can be whether from your side or user side. It can be because of the quality of the software, the sound, interruptions in internet, people having to log in and log out again. so losing the flow of the consultation. So you need to have a kind of plan before that, like save the link somewhere, being able to contact them immediately, send them the link again, have these options to terminate the video sharing, because a lot of times it improves the speed, the connection. Can you go to the next slide? So then at some point you will need to do some kind of evaluation of your service. Usually if you use a software like the lib answers that I mentioned, you can have very detailed information about the time and the day and the date that your interactions took place, how long they are, if they were actually answered or not answered, all these kind of statistics. If you don't have a software that is that detailed, then you need to kind of make a system of your own, right? Like you need to make some kind of entry sheet, maybe in an Excel or in a Google sheet, and keep like decide what kind of information you need beforehand, data information, and what kind of questions after when you conduct your analysis, what kind of questions are you going to pose and what kind of answers you need. What I would suggest is usually these are like the 4 things that you will usually need, right? What time of the day your interaction took place, what day, because you will see, for example, when the semester starts, usually you will have more questions online, or during when the campus is closed, but the library is still working, then you might have more virtual reference questions. You also need to have a grasp on what is the percentage of the questions that you can actually answer through virtual reference, and of course how long were your interactions, so that you can adapt your schedule, your reference, your virtual reference schedule, because you cannot do many things at once, right? Like you cannot have face-to-face maybe reference and virtual reference at the same time. Also gather direct feedback from the users. The lib chat feature in lib answers, they have like an automated survey that administers to the users when they close the chat. It has like emoticons where people can designate if they were happy with the conversation or not. But you can, if you don't have the software, you can also use surveys, university-wide surveys. Usually the library will administer a survey each year to ask about the quality of the services and how happy users are with that. So you can insert a question about your reference, your virtual reference services there. Can you go to the next slide? So the main challenges that we faced mainly in Nazarbayev was about the privacy of the user information, because we kept a lot of data. As I told you, now in Georgetown, we don't keep. We keep, for example, the transcript. We don't keep the emails of the users and all this. So we don't need to be that much concerned. Plus, Georgetown has an overall strategy policy about personal data of their users, and that policy covers the library as well. This was not the case in Nazarbayev. So you need to think about what is the overarching policy about data, personal data of your users in your university. If that policy covers the library, and if it's not, then you will need to have your own policy, right? You will usually need all this data. Like in Nazarbayev, we needed it because, as I said, we were a bigger company. We didn't know all of our users. So if we needed to follow up with a question, we needed all these emails, names, what kind of course and what kind of department are they studying in, right? So we could answer our questions better. So you will have all this data because you need to follow up. But at some point, you will need to delete all this. So to delete all this data. Usually, you will get this information like what is the acceptable length of time of retaining this data from your country's legislation. So if I remember correctly, in Azerbaijan, it did allow you to retain data up to 1 year, 1.5 years. So I would say you need to kind of connect this with the evaluation analysis that you are doing of your virtual service. For example, if you establish a circle of assessment and evaluation for your virtual services that is about 6 months or 1 year, that will be usually the length of time that you need to keep your data. So once you finish your analysis, you can delete it. Okay? So you decide on your circle of assessment and evaluation, and then in your policy, always following the legislation of your country and the policy of your university, decide for how long you can keep this kind of private information of your users. Another challenge, as I said before, is what is acceptable behavior from your users and from your part, and when can you terminate conversations, right? So this, again, it's a library-wide decision. You will decide this. For example, what kind of language do you accept, what kind of comments, etc. And another issue that might come up, especially if you establish an automated questions system, for example, that you have like automated emails, you might get a lot of spamming and even emails with viruses. So you need to have like a good software to check for these things. And always be careful before opening an email, like what kind of questions are, like what kind of text they have in the subject, and if you can filter them. Like a lot of times, I think even in lib answers, you can put some keywords. For example, contact me to get this price of $1,000, for example. A lot of spamming emails begin like this. So you can put filters like that, and this email will directly be archived, like in a spamming folder. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so basically that's the end of my presentation. I am giving you here 2 resources. If you cannot use like an expensive software like lib answers, there is this free software called Subject. I haven't used it. I just know that it exists. It's called Subject Plus. It's basically something like LibGuides, but they do have a feature that resembles lib answers, which means that you can create a knowledge database, add the most commonly asked questions there, and present this to your users as a virtual library service. And if about chatting, I think Reisa mentioned that you might go ahead with chatting with Facebook, but I think in Azerbaijan, before we implemented the lib chat, we did try some free chatting software. So I'm giving you here a link from an article that lists this software. I think the one that we used was called RoboChat, something like that. Let me check. Yes, and it's a free software that you can install in various websites, and you can even save some of the conversation. I think we used this Rocket Bots, it was called. So for this For this, I would suggest that you consult your IT department, of course. They would know better what is best to use and what is safest and what can be compatible with website software that you have. So I think the next slide is the last one. Yeah, so thank you. That was my presentation. So I just tried to share with you my personal experience and what kind of problems we encountered and how we tried to solve them through policy, through using software and all of this. So I'll just listen to your questions now.
Thank you so much, Pascalia. That was really a very clear and a very comprehensive presentation of the virtual reference service. I know it's really something that we can learn since a lot of your experiences are the same challenges that we have, but we also have more of those problems as well. So what can we share the chat room? I'll see who are asking questions. Can you go to the chat, please?
So I am in the chat now.
Okay, so there are questions. Okay, so first and foremost, while we're running through our questions here, apologies for those who didn't get in. A lot are still telling us the FB and other accounts they said they cannot get through. So again, I would say that this is actually intended for small businesses and why we were not prepared to have this huge number. We had about 320 live members from us in the other account, and right now we have 50 here. So it's really huge for us to explore. Okay, one question from Jocelyn, right? It seems we share the same problem in delivering virtual reference service, that is interruption with the connection. So what other alternatives can you recommend so that researchers can still get the most out of library resources and services?
So as I said before, you need to treat your virtual reference services as one complementing the other, right? Have various channels of communication. So you need email, try to have chat if possible, some kind of conferencing, video conferencing, and always try to establish like a safe flow. So for example, always share links for the video conferencing, like have a stable link for video conferencing. So if someone signs out, they can sign back in. With email, for example, always suggest to them if something cannot be resolved through email, suggest to them to meet you online in a virtual. If they cannot in virtual, then explain to them, please have some patience. I will need some more information from you. Can you answer these questions? For example, what have you already accessed? With which tools are you already familiar with? So you just need to make them feel safe and make them feel that they have alternative channels of communication with you. You are there. And yes, there will be interruptions, and that's why we try to expand, let's say, the channels of communication that we are offering to the users. So they are not limited to only one. So if you can explain to me what is usually the challenge in the Philippines, for example, is it video conferencing, or is it that people don't use emails? They don't like to use emails? Because I mean, depending on the country and the culture, this might change. So you might need to think like, which communication channel should I put more weight on, and how can I make that better and more available to my users?
Allow us to share with the group your presentation, the PowerPoint, so we can share with the group the presentation.
Teresa, I didn't hear you. Did you ask me something?
Yeah. I asked, this is one question from Yolanda. Just asking if we can share your presentation to them. Is it okay with you if I share it with them? Okay.
Yes. I can download it in PDF and I will send it to you. You can share it with them.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think actually I already have the PowerPoint. I'll just put it into PDF so that would be easier. So for all the participants, please know, just send us an email on the CPU link because this is the CPU program, or to the other webinar platform. There's a version instruction there. Just provide us with your email so we can share with you the link to this webinar. And again, there's a question here. If it will be doing another webinar, I think with this overlooking number, we will discuss and possibly, really possible that we can do a webinar applying what we also learned and what are the things that we do here. We will be doing here this afternoon within the webinar. Another thing was calling another platform. There's another question. Is there free embeddable chat box like Yahoo Chat or Google Chat that you can suggest or that you have experience using before?
So as I said, we used at some point, we were experimenting with free chat software. And I gave you a link at the end of the presentation to an article that lists various free chat software. I think the one that we tried is software for chatting that can be embedded in websites, in the websites of the library that you have, like in the homepage. But you will need the help of your IT department to install them and to explain to you exactly what are like the safety precautions that you need to take. So, like, as I said, I'm an IT person, so I don't want to like promote software from here because the only one that I have used extensively is the paid one, the LibChat. But I think people from your IT departments would, you can send them this article that I linked to you at the last slide. They give like various alternatives for free software for chat, and maybe they can decide which one to use. I don't know, have I answered your question?
I guess it's really clear. Having the reference is really good starting point. Thanks, Ms. Kalia. There's another question. We have a bunch here in the other platform. How to promote this? She's asking, how do we market or promote virtual reference service to public libraries? I know you're academic life, but probably ideas in general to do promotion or marketing of virtual reference services.
So I would say that you need to partner up with stakeholders. So you need to partner up with a higher management because they control a lot of communication channels, right? Like they might get into contact with a larger number of users, or people might read their emails more than they would read from the library itself. So if so try to do that, like partner with different departments, promote your services in, like in emails that people would read like in other occasions. I would say one is this. I would say try to build oh, sorry. I think someone is trying to ask something.
Hello? We did it.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear. to partner with stakeholders. Other one is, of course, if you already have some kind of a marketing tool, like a newsletter or something like that, you should remind your users that this service is now available and how they can use it in that, let's say, marketing tool. I mean, if you're like a public library or a school library, you could even put, you know, like posters, like print posters in the entrance to make people aware that you have a virtual reference, you know, like make a cute poster with a cute animal or something like that. And, you know, market it like that. When people enter the library in the entrance, they can see that there is like a new service there. And the last one that we also already mentioned, try to be visible, at least at first, in as many virtual spaces your users, the virtual spaces that the users frequent, right? Like in the home page, if you have like courses, or I don't know, if you are like with a school, put it in the course guide. I mean, it depends on what kind of library you're working and what kind of virtual spaces your users frequent. So try to be visible there. You don't need to put like a big, like the whole chat window on the home page. You can put like a button maybe that has very distinctive colors. That's what we did in Azerbaijan. We had like a button at the lower end of the page. If someone hovered over that button, the chat would appear. Yeah, so try to think a little bit creatively in terms of visuals, but also like what partnerships you have, what kind of virtual spaces your users are there.
Thank you so much. That's really good. This, collaboration is really good.
Yeah.
And actually, it doesn't really mean that everything will become online. Our resources. I still have 3 more questions here. Let me answer first. One is the other laptop. Okay. So this question: after been practicing the PLAI for a long time, what can be the most common incidents that we can encounter if we're going to start doing it, and how do you address that problem?
Reisa, I haven't heard. Can you put it in the chat? Because it's a long question and I didn't hear it clearly.
I'll use your chat box because I'm far from my desk. Okay. Sorry, not that.
Is it the last question about what is considered virtual and the internet connection problem?
That's a different one. I get to answer that first. There's a different question. I'll put it in your chat box. Okay. So, did you get it? How were you able to? Sorry, I think that's not the.
Okay, is it about the one? How are you able to manage it? Okay, about management, right?
Just a minute. I think it's about. Just a minute. Okay, probably we would answer first the one from Daniel. Do we consider text lines as virtual? In some cases, cable connection is not a problem. The lack of internet access itself and the SMS are interrupted to connect.
So yeah, this is like a big issue. You know, who has access and who doesn't, what we call the digital gap, right? So, I mean, and the SMS, you have to pay for this, and this would be even more expensive, which is a problem. Of course, if you are doing SMS, it is considered a virtual reference. It's just, I have never used it, because we were always in, in environments that internet access was adequate. Well, yes, I would consider SMS a virtual reference and try to approach it more or less something between email and chat, because you can it's not as instant as chat, but it's not as slow as email, right? You still have a limitation on the characters that you need to compose your message. I don't know how many links you can send through SMS, right? Like how easy is it to share a link to an article or something like that? And how do you send, for example, the full text through the SMS? I don't know. I mean, it has a lot of problems. The SMS virtual reference, but if there's nothing else, I don't know. Do you have this? I read it somewhere that there are these. There are some solutions like that you can have data if you go to a specific data hotspot, and you can download from there things that you need, and then you go back to your house and you can just kind of use the document that you have downloaded from there. Maybe you can have an approach like this, suggest to people to go to their internet cafe, or go to the closest library or a school that has some kind of internet connection, and you can contact them. They reach that place that has the internet connection. Me myself, I would like to be educated about this kind of problems with limited access to the internet. I don't know. Yeah, I would try, depending on the nature of the question. If it's something that needs, for example, for you to share with them full text articles or give them a consultation about a thesis, which takes more time and it needs more resources, maybe you can, through SMS, you can arrange for, you can arrange for a consultation when they will be able to reach a place that actually has internet connection. I don't know if this is something that answers your question.
I think it's pretty much answers your question. But actually, there's still more challenges we see it here in our country. SMS is by data, like you pay the service, or you go unlimited, 7 days, and I don't think the university or the library could support that. And even the limited budget, and this the global epidemic just came in recently. That's something that was thought out by the librarian, the director of libraries, the channel, and think that SMS is the best avenue for libraries to do it, and probably have some specific provider to provide a for the SMS charges that might incur. Okay, so we're quite run out of time. I'll be answering 2 more questions I sent in your link. So the first one is, how are you able to manage the virtual reference service? Is there someone who's solely dedicated in managing it, or do librarians take turns?
So in both universities, all librarians took turns. Librarians who had reference duties, right? Subject librarians, they have reference duties. Reference librarians have reference duties. So it depends. Like if you're familiar, like a lot of times, patron services might not be able to, carry out a virtual reference because they are not as familiar with, subject resources like departmental resources, etc. So you need to kind of create. We created shifts. So, for example, For 2 hours, this reference librarian would take up the next 2 hours will be another librarian. When we were off duty, the chat has a feature that people can still submit questions through the chat, although there is no librarian to answer them right away. But the question is still submitted, and you can see it in the next morning and answer them through email. That's why we needed all that data, as I told you, the school, the email, and everything. So the best thing to do is that you need to have, again, a policy for virtual reference that kind of designates which librarians will take over the virtual reference, what will be their shifts, and all of this. I would suggest not have only one librarian, because first of all, especially if you're like a bigger department and you have different subject specialties, I mean, a librarian from a subject specialty will not be able to answer the questions that are coming from another department. So it's better to have someone all the time on chat, and if they cannot answer, they can reroute the question to the appropriate librarian. That's what we did. So if it's a specialized question, you can just like contact them somehow, maybe through an internal chat or the chat in it has this rerouting option that you can transfer a chat to a librarian even if they are not online, and that librarian can continue the chat. If you don't have this software, you can just tell your patron, it's another librarian who is specialized about this, I will forward the question to them. And you can ask them, do you want them to answer you through email, or would you like to book an appointment with them or something like that? So you need to have like a system both for shifts throughout the day and which days of the week, which librarian takes over, but also what are you going to do with questions that you cannot answer, right? Like who is your point of contact, and who is the which librarians do you contact for specific questions?
Okay. I think that was the last question. So just you already answered all the questions, right? Yeah, I think we already did answer all the questions. So just a few points.
Someone is asking what can be the most common problem with VRS here? You mean for the Philippines, what would be the most common problem?
What would be the most common problem? It's still running in general. Okay, there will be two answers that I'm going to give. In the Philippines, we always wanted high-tech environment. We wanted to integrate technology with our in our services. So what we think is we have limited capability, and at the same time, technology acceptance. Technology. Some of you can chat with me there, share with you your problems. But for me, the one identifiable problem that we have is the lack of acceptance in the academic libraries of faculty and students. So they might find emailing and video conferencing as fun, or rather video conferencing is fun, but emailing is not really something that they would always do. They would just neglect emails. And even though the platform might be open, sometimes it's when it's a formal setting, everyone will be that interested compared to like just one chat. So on our end here in Central Philippine University, there's a reason why we're creating our own icon. So we will be launching it later. There's like a kind of a virtual person, so that if other people will see it, or the academic community will see it more likely. I think this is we just have very few challenges, but it's hard to address. Anyone else from my group here wants to answer the question?
Can I make a suggestion? Like, if you have some kind of media, social media or applications like WeChat, WhatsApp is very popular here. You could establish a channel of communication for your social references from there. Just use what people are using already. You know, like create an account for the library in WhatsApp, let's say, and ask people to contact you through there. You know, but you just need to take into account that you with some social media and some applications there are some certain things that you can't do. For example, you cannot share your screen with WhatsApp. So again, this needs to go to your policy, like what kind of questions you can answer and all of this. So what? Sorry if I'm interrupting. I'm just trying to think out of the box.
Yeah, that's true. Well, as I mentioned here, what we're more of using still Facebook Messenger. So that's the reason why our main platform of Messenger. Okay, so there's an answer from Lourdes. She said, actually, the main issue in the Philippines is that people would rather believe information from Facebook rather than consult libraries and other verified sources. This is probably so true.
Reisa, I didn't hear it again. I didn't hear it clearly.
Okay, so from Lourdes, she was saying that in terms of information searching or information sharing, most of the Filipinos would rather find answers or would rather get answers from Facebook, from posts on Facebook, rather than consult libraries. So that's our main problem here in the Philippines.
So this is not only in the Philippines, this is worldwide, and especially this problem, and especially now with this coronavirus crisis, it has become more apparent. And even me, I get messages from my friends with with conspiracy theories about the disease and all of this. So what we did in our library was, in the first page, in the home page, we created a guide, we provided, let's say it better, we provided a link to a guide on how to search information online safely. So we have, you can check it out in our website. I'll share the guide here. To give you an example, I'll share it in the chat. You can explain to them have a hotspot, let's say, in your homepage where you explain to them what's the easiest way to find online sources through the library. Have some kind of evaluation tools for them. For example, for the disease now, for COVID, we provide some fact-checking websites. We provide also sources that are safe for information about the crisis. We provide, for example, links to actual data. We provide links to the WHO and all of this. So it's very difficult to change the mindset of the people. It's almost impossible. But every time you are in a friendly conversation with your peers or with your library or even with your friends and family, try to bring this issue that everything that is circulating in social media is not safe, and that they should apply the critical skills, have like scientific thinking about finding information sources. So I'm not. Did I answer the question? Was that the question, that people prefer information through Facebook instead of libraries?
Yeah, that was a challenge. It's a good answer. It's a good insight for our librarians here. Yeah. So I think this is all for now. we're about to start our webinar. So again, thank you so much for all your help in this webinar, our team here. And Pascalia, thank you so much for helping us and for graciously accepting my invitation. Finally, the Librarians in the Philippines have seen you. I thought it was only Midwestern Visayas, but it expanded. We're hoping things like this is a very interesting topic, which I just realized a lot needed here in the Philippines. We're looking forward to have it soon. We will try to make a series with a better platform that we can use to avoid this glitch. And also, I'd like to thank the people here at the back, Director Cynthia Calenia, of course, Regalo, is also trying to live stream us in the other platform. Thank you so much, because we reached more than 300 participants. Thank you for your help. It was a great opportunity for us. If I may say, before I leave the lectures for Pascalia, Pascalia used to work at the Zalbayab University. So we kind of have similar experiences in PRS. We knew a bit of the challenges that we had. And in my other universities where I get in, where was before, we also do virtual preference service. And that's the reason why I'm trying to promote it here in the Philippines, starting from my hometown. So if you need help or anything, feel free to contact me through Synchronous Library or directly PM me. If you can get it to Messenger, just send me a message. I would be more than happy to share how we're going to collaborate so that you can also establish a virtual reference service. This is already the new normal. We badly need a virtual presence so that we can reach out to our library clients. So again, thank you so much. Any last words, Pascalia?
I just wanted to thank you for inviting me. It was very nice meeting you, everyone. If someone wants to contact me, Reisa, you can share my email. I will be happy to discuss cases with you. I'm also interested, and I would like to educate myself on how people approach this issue, like from different, from different countries and different cultures, and what kind of challenges you face. I mean, we need to know about these things as librarians, So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you so much for the participants, and have a pleasant afternoon. Okay, bye.
Thank you, bye.